I'm John Espino from The Young Folks, and I'm speaking with Sabaah Folayan and Damon Davis, co-directors for the upcoming documentary Whose Streets. The film covers basically what sparked the Black Lives Matter movement, and just the greater effect that it had on Ferguson. So the big question I felt like the film asked was, how do you continue that movement? So how do you think the movement should be continued?
I'm glad you were the first person to get this summation. I've never heard anybody put it like that, but that's exactly what we were going for. And I personally think that that's up to you. What do you do well? You're a reporter. And I say whatever superpower you have, use it for good and not evil. And I think that's kind of, I think we both left it, we were thinking to leave it ambiguous so that people would figure out where they could fit in. And
just like
into
use
the
their
movement.
strengths.
Yeah, and to help people and to help this movement. Because by helping this movement, there's no way for you not to help everybody else. If you help the person all the way at the bottom, there's no way for life not to get better for everybody else. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think, I don't necessarily have an answer for what do we do, but I think that if we are applying our talents and our resources to making a difference and affecting what we have control over, altogether that can be extremely powerful. And it's not about waiting for a monolithic leader or a savior to come and solve all of our problems. It's about every day being a problem-solving process and making the world a little bit better for the people who are going to come after us.
So I know one of the biggest proponents in there, or like one of the things that helped the cause the most, was social media. That was one of the big things. How do you think that helps compared to setting up protests back in the day?
I mean, I think it's just different. Like, there are way more people in the world now than there were back then, and so we need to communicate to more people at a time. I think that, there's an ability to have these real-time conversations and bring things out, put things on a platform without having to have resources or commercial distribution. That's a really big deal. There's something really democratic about what bubbles up to the surface on the internet. If it's, especially I think on a platform like Twitter, I think a lot of other platforms are have really heavy, I'm sorry, this is way too nerdy, but there are a lot of algorithms that are dictating what we see. The whole fake news controversy, this idea that people are being projected information, based on their habits. And I think Twitter in particular and social media in general has the potential to be a very democratic way of understanding how one another feels, exchanging information. I think we need to protect that. I think internet neutrality, I mean, it's probably gone already, but, internet freedom is really
important.
important.
On the news right now, something was just signed saying we just lost it all.
Right.
That's basically been my news watching experience.
It's like, what are we losing today?
I literally I only tune in like once every 3 days because I can't take it, and then it's just like every time it's worse. It's always worse than I could have imagined.
5 rights in the last 2 weeks.
I mean, we can laugh about it, but it's awful.
No, it's really
It's really disturbing.
Yeah. So I know one of the most powerful scenes for me in the documentary there was a scene where an activist basically told other allies that if you didn't come to get arrested, you need to go home. So do you think that's a problem with allies just kind of half-stepping into the movement?
Yeah, I think people want to do just enough to not feel guilty. I think a lot of people find themselves, and I don't think that people are particularly bad people, but a conversation we were having earlier is around the idea that the people with the privilege, it's not going to be everybody bubbling up to privilege. It's going to be the people with the privilege coming down. And that's the hard part, is giving up a certain lifestyle and actually putting yourself in the line of fire and actually, and even before we even get to that, just self-reflection and understanding what culpable role you play in my everyday life being worse. And we all got it to a certain degree, but it's just like in this particular context, I do think that white allies sometimes do just enough, and I think that there could be more. And I don't think that everybody's like that, but I do think that some people are there maybe to get an experience, or some people are there thinking that they can help, but the real shots and the real harm and the real problems get left for us to pick up that baggage and for us to be the moral compass of the world, as it's always been. You know what I mean? We take the slings and arrows so they can feel better later and say that we all You know, we all did, yeah. And then
To show the pictures to their friends. Look, I was there.
Yeah,
Look at
to their
that.
grandkids.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I mean, me personally, honestly, I don't believe in allies because I think that allies implies that there's a war and there are parties who are at war and then there's somebody outside of it who's going to come in and help on one side or another. You would never expect an ally in a war to do things that are going to actually hurt their home country or their own, land. They're only going to sacrifice so much to help someone else. White supremacy is not that kind of situation. White people are deeply implicated in this war. And so you can't be my ally. Either you're fighting on my side or you're fighting on the opposite side, is how I feel about it. And so people who feel like they can just show up and I'm fighting right now, but then I can go home and live a different life, you're actually not on my side because I can't ever escape from this. Whether I'm at home with my family, and that's what the film tries to show, is that this is about survival. This permeates all aspects of our lives, and we have to allow it to do that constructively. But for people who consider themselves allies to pretend that they're not involved in this problem just because they're not next to any black people at the time, I think it's part of the reason why we see so much stagnation. I think it's part of the reason why we see a left that cannot answer the needs of its own contingents, because there's this idea that you can be in the middle or you have 1 foot in and 1 foot out, but we're talking about human rights. We're talking about the right to be alive in this country. That's not something that that you can be moderate on. Either we have them or we don't. So that's how I feel about allyship. I like people who consider themselves to be co-conspirators or who consider themselves accomplices, or who maybe don't even need a label for themselves or a name for themselves, but who are just going to show up and do the work and put their body on the line and don't, need to be told. So, yeah, I think that scene is a really important one to pick out. I'm glad that you asked about it because it's a real ongoing issue, is that some people get to choose when to put their bodies on the line, and some people's bodies are always on the line. And if you're going to make the choice, you definitely can't back out at the last minute.
Which is kind of what the documentary did show. It showed some people just not willing to go all the way
and get out the way.
It's
And get out of the
scary,
way.
and it's
stay at
scary.
home.
It's a real thing. Like, it's scary being a black person in this country right now. So I can only imagine how scary it might seem to leave the comfort of your home and your life and your social standing and to take that side. But I promise that it's so much more rewarding, and you are able to live you can live a much fuller and deeper and richer experience when you're actually engaging with reality in the way that it is.
I like the way you put that. Engaging in reality.
Yeah.
Just kind of examining the privilege you have.
Some people get a choice.
Yeah. So, like you mentioned, right now the left isn't completely, I guess, the whole film had a criticism for Obama, for example.
Yeah.
So what do you think needs to change?
I think that we have to somehow unpack, and I think, Donald Trump presents an interesting opportunity. I'm curious to see how we're going to respond to it. But we need to unpack class division next and understand that it's completely intertwined with racism. There is no separation between capitalism and racism. I think people who like to put them on a hierarchy are people who are looking to avoid trying to solve the problem of racism, but they're totally intertwined. And so what you have on the left are people in power whose financial interests are very indistinguishable from those on the right, and they're making the decisions. And I don't trust any billionaire to make decisions for me. So I think that we would have been in a difficult situation with Hillary. She wasn't championing the causes that communities of color were prioritizing. I think Trump is obviously much more blatant and disgusting and disturbing and terrifying.
At least he telling us what he on. At least he being clear about who he is, and he ain't trying to lie. Like, you know what I mean? He's
upfront about it.
Yeah.
Right. But I think the left needs to stop. The left needs to stop being pretending and stop being satisfied with only having white women and white LGBT people be the representatives of diversity, because that's what they've effectively done, is that they've allowed white womanhood and white queerness to be their top priorities, and this is how they show they're progressive. And other women and other queer folks are supposed to believe that that the left has our best interests at heart too. But when you look at the leadership and you look at the platform, you look at the decision making,
How resources are dispersed.
and they're ignoring a huge swaths of their contingency are being ignored because their contingents are being ignored because they are not willing to acknowledge that we are facing different stakes. And they are not willing to prioritize the stakes of the people at the bottom and recognize that that is the strength of their movement, that is the strength of their side. It is not a centrist, rich, white woman, upper middle class, WASP person who has progressive views and doesn't hate people. That's not enough to stand against an extreme person who's willing to say anything, do anything, play on anybody's emotions. The only thing that can really fight that is actual truth, actual real commitment to serving the needs of the people.
Yeah, I agree. I think liberals are more frustrating to me than the classic sheet wearing, redneck evil that we like to classify as racism. You know what I mean? I think liberals are much more dangerous. And I like, and we are filmmakers, so I like to make film references. I think Get Out is a masterpiece of showing how liberal evil works and how systematic things are. And if you're not willing to touch on the system, and you just willing to talk to me and as my friend and hang out, so you say you got a black friend, but the system is still rolling and well oiled up, and you getting all of the fruits out of it, and I'm not seeing any of it, then we not on the same level. You don't see my pain, and we ain't fighting the same war. You know what I mean? You chilling, and it's real easy to be an ally or whatever when you are not uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Like and
when you can still go home to all those
and you don't have
privileges.
to unpack anything mentally. You don't have to unpack anything mentally. You think just by laughing with some people or being around some black people that you really doing anything or unpacking anything, and I just don't think that's feasible. I think a lot of the war happens internally too, and I think that's something people need to really, they got to do that for themselves. No movie that we can make could do that for anybody.
So for someone like Obama, who everyone was kind of looking towards to kind of guide the situations, to kind of be the outspoken voice that he was voted to be, how did that feel?
That shit was heartbreaking, to be honest with you. Like, I was there. I'm from Illinois. I'm from East St. Louis. Like, I remember old people telling me, making me go vote for him before he was anything. You know what I mean? And like people holding rallies and him coming to East St. Louis and stuff like that, and or surrounding areas. I remember going to a rally driving from Belleville, Illinois, up to a rally he did in Springfield to announce Biden as his running mate. I just remember it being electric and people having hope. I remember fighting older people in my family, like my father, who just knew he was gonna get killed and nobody believed in him, and he made it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was the first election I voted in, and I just remember, like, we actually can do things. We actually can have some power, and he just let us down. He let us down, and it's only so much I can blame on that his hands was tied in Congress, and some shit was just like me personally being naive about what the real world was, and thinking that there was some magic being that was gonna come and a savior like person that was gonna come and help us, and it's not like that. And when black people, specifically black people in St. Louis, where I come from, were in turmoil, he did the safe thing, and he called us the same things that Fox News was calling us. So I don't know about that liberal, like there's a left and a right. Nah, I think they all, like, if you up there, you working for the same people that the last president was, and that the next one gonna work for. You know what I mean? So I just lost a lot of faith in the federal system in general.
The whole two-party system.
Yeah. I lost all faith in it with Obama.
So, I mean, we've obviously seen a lot of protests, especially this year alone, but it doesn't seem like many of them were Black Lives Matter focused. So, do you think there's such a thing as protest fatigue?
Yeah.
Yes,
I've experienced it.
Yes.
I think it's definitely true. I think that especially when you don't see any major response from your government and the levels of power that you're trying to push on, I think there is a level of fatigue, but I think what also happens is, movements have ups and downs and go in waves. And the sustained protests, the day after day protesting that happened in Ferguson went on for longer than the Montgomery bus boycott. So I think that in that amount of time, people were talking to each other, developing their political theories, creating relationships. I mean, the network, I think, that grew out of this is massive. So I think people are still very much active. And I think just because you don't see people in the street doesn't mean that the movement isn't very active, because I think people are focusing on cultural change and organization building and grassroots building and local politics and, things that may not be as full of spectacle but may have more tangible long-term results.
That's a great point with spectacle. So how do you? We should be asking the question: how do we define protest? Because the protest is pushing back on the system. Most of the people that I know that was doing that 2 years ago are doing it right now. They're just doing it in different ways. And just because the spectacle of being out in the street has went down doesn't mean that people are not actively protesting in other forums.
Do you think the visibility helped more when it was more, like you said, kind of on the streets?
I don't know.
Do you think that helped it or hurt the movement?
I don't know. I don't know about help. I don't know if that's the question. I think visibility helps to a degree, but once it becomes grotesque, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
People just like watching black people die over and over again. I think that does the exact opposite of what it's meant to do. I think it becomes desensitizing to both the victim and the victimizer. I think if you constantly seeing people that look like you being murdered, then you and nothing happens to the other side doing it, and you start to believe that your life don't matter. And I think that people that's watching it too, if ain't nothing happening to them, then shit, it becomes a grotesque spectacle of watching black death occur over and over again. So I don't know. I don't know. I think it helps to a degree, but I also think that the other side can use it to hurt us too. It can be a psychological warfare weapon on us too.
Where it desensitizes you?
Yeah.
I don't know if you know about Chicago's South Side.
South, the black side.
Yeah.
Just
Just like the South Side. Yeah, just the area. It's constantly on the news. They have every weekend a death toll. I feel like that's also kind of desensitizing. Just kind of putting it down to numbers.
It becomes a feature of just the place and a feature of that reality. And I think for me, since I saw the image of Mike Brown laying on the ground, I don't know if I've watched any of those videos. I've tried to avoid as many of them as possible. So I know that it's not necessary to watch them in order to feel. It's not necessary to watch someone be killed in order to care about people who are alive. And I think we minimize black people to their bodies and to their corpses. Those people are gone when you're seeing them dead. And so we really tried in the film to make sure that we showed Michael Brown as a living person, or at least in the way that his memory lived on, and that we did not focus on him as a dead person, because I think that this country, like you were saying, this country has constantly been fascinated with Black death. It goes back to the lynching postcards and just the practice of lynching as a recreational sport. I think that there's a really strange and confusing fascination with our suffering, our torture, and the destruction of our physical bodies is a pastime in this country. And so when we're spreading images in order to spread a message and spread awareness, we do have to be careful that we're not participating in what amounts to a type of pornography for a lot of people, and we're not providing them with fodder for what they already believe. I think that we can put out much more nuanced and effective messages, and there's this kind of knee-jerk reaction that is like, share this, and I just saw this and you need to see it too. But at what point have we seen enough? How many deaths do we need to see to know that it needs to stop?
Like how much do you need to see to get to the point that it's wrong? And I think that people know that.
And that was the whole thing about body cameras as a solution too. It's
like
like
you just get to see
Rodney
it in real
King
time.
got beaten on camera.
Can you pass me that water?
So, the idea that just because we see it happening means we're gonna stop it is
Nothing happened.
obviously
And that was
false.
20 years ago. It was people that's involved in this movement that wasn't even alive when Rodney King, when them riots happened. You know what I mean? Like, and nothing
And I think
has
it
changed.
just speaks to, I think the demand for footage the man to see the tape, it just speaks to how much mistrust there is for the words and ideas of black people, that you would not believe us when we told you, as though there was some motivation to make this up. This idea that we have to prove our suffering, prove that you're suffering, prove that you're hurting. I don't think anybody else gets really asked to prove that they're in pain.
Yeah,
as
it's
much
like
as
blaming the victim.
And it
Right.
gets it just gets weird, and it's almost a sexualized thing for you to want to see people. I don't get it. For you to want to, why do you need that much proof? When does the line get crossed into just outright voyeurism of people's pain? You know?
I think it's immediate. I think it's in the request, because these people don't then take action. You don't see the amount of action as you see views on these tapes. For all these people who are saying prove it, when you see that proof and you don't act, that's proof enough for me that you didn't really care in the first place. And we're looking, I think it's people who are looking for ways to shut down what we're saying, and nothing will ever be enough to those people. No amount of video, nothing will ever be enough for people who need more proof than an 18-year-old was taken away and he was unarmed.
Yeah.
That sentence alone
should be, because if he would
That
have
shouldn't
been a few shades lighter, there wouldn't be no movie, and we wouldn't be sitting here talking. It wouldn't be. Yeah.
So have you visited Ferguson recently? As you said, like nothing's really changed.
Yeah.
Is Ferguson still kind of the same?
I live in St. Louis. Another distinction is that I think both me and Sabaah have been saying this over and over again, but St. Louis and Ferguson is a 4-block suburb of St. Louis, and also I think that's strategic to try to make that its own thing. Like it lives on an island. And that's how people can just throw all the evil over there. But it's a part of a city. There's a part of a state that is a part of a country. You feel what I'm saying? Ferguson is everywhere, and that's something I'm really glad whoever started saying that when we was out there. It makes perfect sense. But I think that, from what I've seen, a lot of people have been radicalized. That was a moment of extreme radicalization for a new generation of people. And those people are now holding public office. A lot of young people and friends of mine, they are taking public office in St. Louis and St. Louis County. People are actively taking part in their government. They are not trusting the words of the police or the municipalities. They need proof now. You know what I mean? And I think that is a beautiful thing. And I think that is when we do say that things hasn't changed, and I've been a person that has said that, but I think that's something that we really need to hold up and know that that's happening, so that is a example for other people, because that's personal accountability and that's personal responsibility in your everyday life, and that's what we need to do. Even if it ain't voting, even if it ain't that, it's like people have made definitive life choices to be personally responsible or make those people personally responsible to them. Those people that are in charge of your everyday life and write the laws and enforce those laws, they need to be responsible to the people that pay pay their salary, the people that are the taxpayers. And I think that's something that has definitely in my personal radius of St. Louis and St. Louis County, that has changed a little bit. Yeah.
And I think, it feels, and as you live things, I feel like time feels like it's going by much slower than it actually is. It's only been 3 years since this became a national topic, and I think that things like this have ripple effects that take time to play out. So I would say that it's too early to really decide if something has changed or not, because the wheels of power don't move that quickly. But people are acting differently for sure. People are thinking differently. They're having different conversations, and I think that is an indicator that something is going to be different.
Yeah, that leads to change.
I know one of the main things I've seen in kind of the queer POC groups I'm in is different alternatives other than calling the police. How to handle things yourself. Do you agree with?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's totally necessary. I think that policing as we know it has to be abolished. I think that there does need to be some kind of function of protection. I think community policing is one of those ways where I don't necessarily have to call 911, but I know I can call so-and-so down the block if something's wrong, and they're going to come, and they're trained to just de-escalate, and they're trained, you know what I'm saying? And so I think the more we can take back and take into our own hands and take the resources that are being siphoned off into war and reposition them back into the needs of our country, and we be the ones to administer them, we find purpose purpose and find meaning and find calling in providing ourselves the things that we need. I think that is where the most lasting change starts to come from. I think the Books and Breakfast program that came out of Ferguson that keeps going.
Yeah, I would second. I think that's more new things of that nature. Like people setting up, at least in my community, people setting up things specifically for their community and giving them things. But like for me, people ain't never been on calling the police, and I didn't have police in my family. That's something that's a generational thing that's been handed to me, that we gonna handle this here and now, because like even whoever's wrong or right, when they show up, everybody wrong. Everybody that look brown, anything can happen. You know what I mean? Even when like people with mental illnesses, I know that call police, or people, family members of people with mental illnesses call police, and police and that. Like people end up dead when you call them. So I think that like I'm glad that those are conversations happening now. But that was I just think that's something that's a little bit of an older thing than people setting up their own sort of book banks and food and trading things that ain't money, and to help each other, and like a more communal aspect of things outside of the government and the status quo and the powers that be in general. I think that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Thanks for listening. And don't forget to check out Whose Streets.